Hi everyone, welcome to the Meridian Learning and Development Hangout with Fistful of Talent. I'm Allison, and today we're going to be talking about business and technology buzzwords that we see all the time. I'm joined by Jeff Krisick, president of Meridian, and Chris Dunn, CHRO of Kinetics and the founder of Fistful of Talent. So to get started, to take care of a few house cleaning things. If you have any questions or comments during the Hangout, feel free to leave them in the Q&A section to the right of your screen, or you can tweet them using the hashtag #LDHangout. So we'll get started. My first question is, what's the deal with gamification? And I'm going to throw that to you, Jeff.
Sure. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, this is a favorite one of mine here. I think we're maybe entering a little bit of the trough of disillusionment with this buzzword because people have been kicking around gamification for a number of years. And I could never really figure out if it was all about just having fun at work or being able to measure yourself against your peers, whatever it could be. But I think in the end, when you look at kind of the core of what gamification about, it is really trying to bring a little bit of fun into the workplace. We all do things every day, whether it's very basic HR things like taking training or completing a development plan or just working on your real job of maybe trying to close deals or get customers successful with a project. I think the interesting thing about gamification is it really just helps bring kind of a fun way to measure yourself with those things. Maybe it's as simple as giving a badge to somebody for doing a great job. Maybe it's you getting a badge for completing training. So I think at the core, gamification is not a bad idea. I think we just kind of try to turn it into this fun term that it's not. And every meeting I'm in, when I see like a CHRO or a learning leader say gamification, I almost want to laugh a little bit because I'm not sure what they mean or why they're even throwing that buzzword out, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, and Jeff, more to the point, you're not sure that they know really what they mean by gamification, right? I thought gamification, I always thought that we were going to somehow encourage people to learn where they weren't learning before, right? I hate to use the word trick, but I thought we were going to trick people into learning by making learning fun. And then gamification, to your point, I'm not sure what the right definition is, but it seems like it's taken on like 4 or 5 different lives. The most recent example I saw, which I thought was interesting, and some things are better suited to gamification than others. Uber just came out with like a gamification kind of app that kind of like takes you the day in the life of a driver. And so really they're using gamification to a certain extent on the recruiting trail, trying to let people know what it's like to use the app to get somewhere, in San Francisco or some major metropolitan area or what have you. I got a question for you though, Jeff. Based on how Meridian views the world, I'd like to know this just as an HR pro. What do you guys think the right kind of like real simple definition of gamification is? Because there's so many of them, right? Do you guys have a take? I'm sure you've got a decent take in terms of the world of learning. What's your take?
Yeah, I'll kind of answer it maybe in a roundabout way, and you can beat me up for that. But I think you brought up a good point. The first time I heard gamification coming from a learning background, I kind of laughed because folks who've built learning content, whether it's e-learning content or instructor-led course or whatever, they've always tried to introduce some sort of simulation or real-world experience into it. Obviously, you learn things a lot better if you can relate to it, and you feel like it's a little bit of a competition. So I think it's been part of learning for a long time, and we always kind of snickered when you talk about gamification because you're trying to apply it a little bit more broadly, beyond kind of the individual course. And so when I look at it, I do think it's just a simple way of trying to introduce more fun into what we do every day at work. I think it's much broader than learning. And it may be simple. An acknowledgement or a kudos for you completing a course. It may be something that's more relevant to the business process you're working on. And I think it's just how do you introduce some fun ways to measure your progress against that and your progress against peers. But I don't think if you look at kind of the core of how you build learning content, gamification's been in there for a long time as simulation and some of the things they've built into it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess like the final thought I would have is when I've seen gamification done well, to your point, it does a couple things. First of all, it tends to create some type of leaderboard, which, if it does, or it can do that, it doesn't have to do that. And when it does that, it's done in a lighthearted enough way where it doesn't make people feel bad. Yeah. They're not on the leaderboard, right? And then I think the other point that you brought up that's important to know about gamification is just the recognition piece, whether it's badges or that kind of leaderboard. that's a good place to get there. I'm like you. I hear people talk about gamification. I respect, if the definition is coming from somebody at Meridian, I tend to respect it. When I ask other people what they mean by that, basically all I hear is fun.
Yeah.
And that's kind of fleeting from a learning perspective or even a performance perspective, right?
It is, yeah. Yeah. Well, you brought up an interesting downside to introducing gamification. Once you put that leaderboard up there,
right,
show the top 100 people. If you're in the bottom 10 or 20, that may not be the motivation you want to use with your employees. I mean, different people react differently to things like that. So you do have to kind of be careful as you roll it out and think about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I see people, like, when they do that, they say they want it to be fun. Well, there's only so many ways, and a lot of businesses aren't set up to do that type of gamification, but yet make it a simulation that's fun and it's not necessarily representative of your skill. Because if you do that, then it seems like we're losing the whole definition to begin with, right? So I like your point that gamification's been around a long time with simulations. And I know Allison's just like, she's just ready to get back in and give us our next one so we don't spend the whole 20 minutes on gamification. Right, Allison?
I was going to cut you off just now.
See? That's my spidey sense coming in.
The next word we have, and I don't know who wants to take this one, is social collaboration.
Yeah, so I'll take this one to start with, and I'll throw it to Jeff. The buzzword social collaboration, it's around in a lot of areas in the HR suite, even outside of learning, right? A lot of people talk about this. I'm getting ready to do a presentation in a couple of weeks, Michigan Recruiters Conference. And the title of it is the 7 biggest lies in recruiting, right? And basically one of those lies is the fact that social collaboration is going to save us all, right? It's this concept that just because we turn on, regardless whether it's learning or any other part of the enterprise, just because we turn on some collaboration tool, that we lose the need to be effective managers of people, that we lose the need somehow to have like a plan for learning and development, that collaboration is just going to take care of it. So I'll throw it to Jeff with this thought. Like my idea is, first of all, not everybody's social. So your penetration rate in an organization isn't going to be very, very good if the only thing you rely on is social. And then the second thing is that it's limited in many ways. So I think everybody kind of came onto the social scene saying there's a lot of ways to use it effectively, and there are, but it's a feature, it's not a product, is the best way I think I would say. Jeff, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you great point there. It's kind of an outcome of the culture that you set for the company, I think. As we looked at these buzzwords, it was funny because I'm so glad I don't hear the Facebook for the enterprise anymore. Like that was really popular for a number of years with every social platform. This is Facebook for the enterprise, and I think it's great in our personal lives that we want to share lots of information because I kind of set the culture for myself. Like I can decide what I want to do, how much I want to share, how open I want to be. If I want to connect with my friends, my relatives, whoever. But as a company, you kind of have to decide what the culture is going to be because a lot of organizations, sharing information and collaborating doesn't go beyond the individual or their job or their team. They're not. I mean, incentive is the wrong word, so I don't mean they have to be compensated, but they're just not set up to say, yeah, I want to share what I'm working on with everybody in the organization. I want to put out there what my levels of expertise are. I want to volunteer to be reassigned to another job or to move overseas. Because some organizations, there's some negatives in there. Maybe you have a bad relationship with your boss and you don't want to share information. Maybe it's a very competitive organization where you only get to the top by taking credit for everything. And if culturally you don't establish that first, to your point, you can't just throw social and collaboration. You could put the best Yammer, Jive, Lithium, whatever out there, whatever technology you want to throw at it.
Slack.
Whatever it is, Slack. Yeah, the latest buzzword. They're gonna get rid of email. It's the email killer. I've heard that for 20 years. That's just a technology. Unless culturally you're kind of set up to work that way and reward people and motivate people. And I don't always like to say reward because it's not just about compensation, but if they're really set up to be acknowledged for what they're doing and contributing, it's just another technology you're throwing at it. And that I think, because we've thrown so much at it, and you mentioned this, every HR system that's out there talks about social. Every CRM system talks about it. Every other product that's being deployed has it. So now we've built like all these social silos out there where the engineers think they're collaborating, the salespeople think they're collaborating, the recruiters think they're collaborating, the candidates think they're collaborating, but they're all doing it in separate systems, and you kind of really have worse collaboration than you ever did.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. You know, the most effective kind of use of any of the social collaboration tools, Jeff, and the one that's really hot right now is Slack, right? So I wanted to know what Slack was all about, and that's a ubiquitous tool that's not affiliated with learning or anything like that. But to your point, they're going to be an email killer. So I signed up myself and my marketing team at Kinetics for Slack. And what I found was, you know, it was really forced. I tried to collaborate with one person on my marketing team just on some slides that he had put together. And I found it to be really forced versus just picking up the phone and walking through it. And it was really choppy. So it's not the end-all be-all. It's one of my 7 biggest lies of recruiting. It's probably one of the 7 biggest lies of, you know, HR and learning as well.
Well, but you hit a great point. It's got to be natural. I mean, we all have kind of our work patterns of how we do work day in and day out, and you may have 7 different recruiters who do things differently, or 7 different learning leaders who create content differently, they assign it differently. Everybody's kind of got their work pattern, and the social tool that they're using, or the collaboration tool, it's got to be completely natural to their process, because they have to jump out, and it feels like, you know, completely disjointed process. It's not adding value at that point. So I think that's from a vendor perspective, as we look at social and how to layer it into what we do, you know, not for Meridian commercial, it's got to be deeply embedded in the process, because if it is a separate disjointed interface or process, it's just not going to be successful.
Yeah, and the last thing, and Allison, you can kick it back, is that we see like these collaboration tools basically being social communication tools. We see them used about 99% for a replacement for IM, you know, in the organization, and little else at the end of the day. It's tough.
All right, awesome. I've never heard of Slack, so I kind of feel like I need to get up with the times.
it's the hot one now. Like if you follow if you follow like the Bay Area, like, you know, TechCrunch, things like that, it's the darling of the moment. And I'm sure it's great on many levels. And I'm a bleeding edge kind of guy. You can get me. Like I made my team sign up for it, and I'm like, well, we use this the same way we currently use Microsoft Link, basically.
Yeah.
You know,
interesting.
It is what it is.
All right, so for anyone watching who has joined, welcome to the Meridian and Fistful of Talent Learning and Development Hangout. Our next topic is mobile. Jeff, or...
Yeah, I'll jump on that. This buzzword actually I love mostly because it's going down. I mean, or its popularity is waning, not because mobile is not the preferred device, but now because it is so ubiquitous, you almost have to stop talking about it. So I don't mind this buzzword as much because, you know, everybody's got a smartphone. The first question we get in any sort of engagement with a client is, how does it work on a smartphone? How does it work on a tablet? Everybody's moving to kind of this disconnected environment. So I'm glad to see mobile starting to wane because it's become so commonplace. And I do think for the most part the vendors have kind of done a pretty good job of surrounding it and building their applications for it, and starting to see, I think, a real uptake in the adoption by the corporations, at least that we sell to.
Yeah, and I would add on to that, Jeff, and say that, you know, as I think about all these different buzzwords we're going through, I think Meridian's pretty measured about this, but when you look out at the broader kind of HR solution space, you know, all of these buzzwords were leads for entire marketing campaigns for like entire years for a lot of vendors, right? You think about gamification, you think about social collaboration, and now here we are on mobile. And, you know, it's like Tim Sackett, who's also at Fistful of Talent, and I spoke at SHRM this year, and we did like an HR tech buyer's guide. And one of the things we warned people about is you can't buy in, you know, and I'm not sure we couched it this way, but you can't buy into the buzzword as a reason to buy, you know, because that's always going to be fool's gold. You have to look at deeper functionality of any solution, any provider, any vendor that you choose. You really want a partner that's going to dig deep into the space rather than somebody that's just going to try and jam the buzzwords to you and try and force those down. And I'm in the recruiting business, Jeff, and what I would tell you is mobile recruiting has been all the rage. I think the other thing that practitioners have to understand is even if you're on the leading edge of one of these things, and I agree with you, mobile is becoming embedded. It's an expectation of almost every solution. When we look at our total applicants at Kinetics, and we look at the total number of applicants that come from mobile versus just that still come from the desktop, we're still underwhelmed. Now, if you follow the trends, you know it's going there. But we're still underwhelmed, and it really still doesn't drive our business, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, but that talk track is interesting you said, because what's frustrating from a vendor perspective is, you get these RFPs, you get engaged with the client, and they give you those 10 buzzwords. So we see gamification, we see social, we see mobile, and when you ask them, okay, well, great, what % of your workforce is, have you guys issued a phone to today, or do you guys support, bring your own device? And they'll be, no, we don't, and none of them have iPads. Okay, that's great. So what %, of your content have you built that's, has Flash in it? Oh, 80% of it has Flash. Okay, well, that's kind of a problem if you're listing mobile as your top priority that you have to have, key selection criteria. And I think it is. I think you're short-sighted if you don't think about mobile. But I encourage the buyers to balance it with kind of the realities of their business today. And you want to enter a long-term relationship with the vendor, and you want to have a 2 to 3 year roadmap and make sure that everything's aligned. But just balance it, because it's frustrating from a vendor perspective to have all these buzzwords thrown at you, and then you get in the meeting and they're like, well, I'm not really sure what we're going to do right now with mobile content or XAPI or an LRS. We just heard that it's kind of a must-have. And so I just encourage them to challenge themselves and think about what's really important for their business.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. So, Jeff, I'm going to give this next question to you. Do you want to talk a little bit about adaptive learning?
Yeah, this is a good one. I take my interpretation of it. So we did it at Meridian. We've kind of talked a lot about this. I do think there's this intersection of marketing and education and learning right now, where the learning leaders and the education folks are starting to think a lot more like a marketer. So not only is it about building great content, but how do you promote that content? How do you try to think about your end customers, the employees, the partners, whoever it might be, like a customer who you want to keep coming back time and time and again. And to do that, you got to really build a personalized experience. You got to build content that's relevant, that changes based on what the user's doing, much like we expect for a website. When I go to Amazon, I want to see recommendations based on what I bought before. When I start down the shopping cart path, I want to see them recommend things or stop recommending things if I'm focused on buying. And I think adaptive learning, my definition of it is really about kind of that personalized learning experience, not only in the content itself, but in the entire LMS or the entire learning application that you're rolling out. My last point before I'm sure Chris will throw some more on is, it's not just about the content as well. You have a bunch of sales leaders that may want to come into the application and see a completely different user experience than your people on the floor building products who use it once a year. And adaptive learning, as I look at it, big picture, is how do you deliver that entire experience that's very, very personalized for the end user.
Yeah, and Jeff, listening to you talk, so I learned something. You can pat yourself on the back, because that's probably the best definition that I've ever heard of adaptive learning. Like if I have one of my peers in HR try and school me on adaptive learning, like my BS meter would automatically go up, because it sounds like a $20 word when all of us are dealing with $5 problems. But actually, this is a fourth buzzword we've attacked. I don't know if we'll have time for another one, but I think the way you just described it, I think this is the buzzword, having that personalized experience for a learner and kind of their profile or their persona coming in to make them excited about learning. Since we're talking primarily about learning here, I think that's probably the most important buzzword, and probably the one that I would encourage HR pros like myself, if they're talking to people in the industry and they're considering different solutions, and this probably transcends learning, by the way. We could do it for recruiting too, to say, hey, does the system actually adjust for the person that you're serving up content to, or you're serving up like this path, within the solution? I think that's the one that probably matters the most, because I think that's the one that has the most hooks. I think all the other stuff, it's a little bit fleeting, and I would say it's a buzzword. This sounds like a buzzword, but oddly enough, to hear you describe it, it's the one that I like the most for all of the world to pay the most attention to out of all the buzzwords we've talked about today.
I'm glad I was able to enlighten you, because I do think, honestly, that this is one that's really a hot spot for us, because I feel like the LMS and learning in general, there's so much great content that's built. It just kind of goes there and I don't say dies. It just atrophies because the end users can't find it. They can't find it when they need it, and when they do find it, it's not necessarily personalized for the problem they're trying to solve. And then when they come back, what they recommend, is not based on what they did in the past. And I think so much of it in our personal lives, in our consumer lives, the whole world has shifted to that much more personalized experience. And if we can adapt a little bit of that, it would really unlock, I think, a tremendous amount of value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome today. Thanks for everyone who are watching, and thanks for Jeff and Chris for participating on the panel. And we will see you guys next month for the next LD Hangout. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jeff.